Think the 1980s were all neon lights and big blockbusters? Think again. Beneath the mainstream hits, a different kind of cinema flourished. Bold, strange, emotionally raw, and too daring for the spotlight. Today, we're peeling back the curtain on 15 forgotten masterpieces from that electric decade. Films that challenge, surprise, and captivate. If you think you've seen it all, buckle up. These are the stories you never knew you were missing. The Stuntman, 1980. Reality and illusion blur dangerously in The Stuntman, a mind-bending masterpiece that Hollywood shelved for years before reluctantly releasing it. Steve Railsback plays Cameron, a Vietnam veteran and fugitive who accidentally stumbles onto a chaotic film set, only to be roped into serving as a stunt double by the megalomaniacal director. But as the line between acting and reality begins to vanish, he realizes he might be the subject of something far more sinister than just a movie. Peter O'Toole is electric as Eli Cross, the manipulative director, charming one moment, menacing the next, always hovering above the action in his crane like a godlike puppeteer. His Oscar-nominated performance anchors this chaotic ballet of paranoia and creativity. If God could do the tricks that we can do, he'd be a happy man, Eli declares in one of the film's most memorable lines, perfectly encapsulating the movie's exploration of how cinema manipulates reality. Director Richard Rush crafted a dazzling meta-narrative that critiques the power of illusion and the cost of spectacle, spending nearly 10 years getting the film made and released. The production itself mirrored the movie's themes, with Rush fighting studios and financiers to preserve his vision. The film's complex structure weaves together war trauma, romantic obsession, and show business satire into something utterly unique. Critics loved it, but marketing departments didn't know what to do with it. The film's distributor, 20th Century Fox, gave it a limited release after shelving it for 2 years. Still, over the decades, it's gained cult admiration, with Steven Spielberg and Francois Truffaut among its most vocal champions. For cinephiles, this is a holy grail of unclassifiable cinema. Funhouse Mirror meets Warzone meets art film, anchored by thoughtful explorations of perception and trust. Cutter's Way, 1981. A disillusioned beach bum and a haunted Vietnam vet get caught in a web of murder and power in a story that dissects American disillusionment with surgical precision. Cutter's Way is less a whodunit than a slow unraveling of American rot, focusing on the aftermath of the Vietnam War and the erosion of the American dream. Jeff Bridges plays Richard Bone, a yacht salesman and perpetual underachiever who witnesses something suspicious near a murder scene. John Hurd gives the performance of his career as Alex Cutter, a bitter, one-eyed, one-legged Vietnam veteran consumed by rage and alcohol. Together, they form an unlikely investigative duo, pursuing a wealthy, untouchable businessman, whom Cutter becomes convinced is responsible for the crime. The film's Santa Barbara setting provides a sun-drenched backdrop that contrasts sharply with the darkness of its themes. Director Ivan Passer, part of the Czech New Wave before emigrating to America, brings a European sensibility to this distinctly American tragedy. His careful eye captures both the beautiful California landscapes and the inner devastation of its characters. Initially titled Cutter and Bone, United Artists lost faith in the film after a poor test screening and dumped it with minimal promotion. It never caught fire in theaters, but left an indelible mark on critics like Pauline Kael, who called it a modern classic. It's a neo-noir soaked in melancholy, beautifully shot, and saturated with post-Vietnam disillusionment. The studio mishandled its release, and audiences weren't ready for something this jagged and uncompromising. But with time, its cult grew. Now, it's revered as one of the most poignant portrayals of trauma and moral ambiguity in 80s cinema, a film that asks difficult questions about justice, loyalty, and what happens when the powerful remain untouchable. Local Hero, 1983. What if a corporate exec was sent to swallow a tiny village and the village ended up swallowing him whole? That's the setup for Local Hero, Bill Forsyth's enchanting comedy drama about capitalism colliding with a community in a remote Scottish coastal town. Peter Riegert plays McIntyre, a Houston oil executive sent to purchase an entire Scottish village for his company to build a refinery. Burt Lancaster turns in a scene-stealing role as Felix Happer, his eccentric astronomy-obsessed boss. But the real magic lies in the film's quiet rhythms and its ensemble of eccentric Scottish locals who slowly teach our protagonist about wonder, stillness, and priorities. The fictional village of Furness becomes almost a character itself, a place where the northern lights dance over ancient beaches, where a Soviet fisherman negotiates deals during his regular visits, and where the local hotelier casually changes roles throughout the day. The film's environmental themes were prescient for 1983, tackling corporate responsibility decades before it became a mainstream concern. Director Bill Forsyth infuses the film with a gentle magical realism. A recurring hermit character lives on the beach in defiance of the oil company's plans. The town's negotiations are both shrewd and humanistic. The entire community shares in potential profit while protecting what matters most, their way of life and natural surroundings. With a gorgeous Mark Knopfler soundtrack and a tone that flirts with the mystical, Local Hero is one of the most gently subversive films of its time. Its final scene, a slow push-in on a phone booth as Knopfler's Going Home plays, is one of cinema's most perfectly bittersweet endings. It didn't scream for attention, so it didn't get much. But for those who've discovered it, it lingers longer than most. A quiet masterpiece about what we value and what we leave behind. Body Heat, 1981. Take classic noir, throw it into a heat wave, and crank the sex appeal up to 10. That's Body Heat. Lawrence Kasdan's directorial debut stars William Hurt as Ned Racine, a bumbling Florida lawyer seduced by Kathleen Turner in her breakthrough role as Maddie Walker. What begins as a steamy affair during an oppressive Florida heat wave spirals into manipulation, arson, and murder as Ned falls deeper under Maddie's spell. The chemistry between Hurt and Turner is explosive, smoldering with an intensity that set a new bar for on-screen eroticism in the 1980s. Their first meeting, Turner telling Hurt, "You're not too smart, are you? I like that in a man," perfectly establishes the power dynamics that will drive the story. The film's script is razor-sharp, filled with double entendres and innuendo that harken back to classic noir while pushing boundaries that couldn't have been crossed in the genre's original heyday. Kasdan, fresh off writing Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Empire Strikes Back, crafted a meticulously plotted tribute to noir traditions while updating them for contemporary audiences. Borrowing cues from Double Indemnity and The Postman Always Rings Twice, it modernizes noir without losing the genre's fatalistic soul. The supporting cast includes Ted Danson as a tap-dancing prosecutor and Mickey Rourke in a small but pivotal role that showcases his early promise. The film's visual style is as carefully constructed as its plot. Cinematographer Richard H. Klein bathes every frame in amber light and glistening perspiration, making the heat a palpable presence that drives the character's worst impulses. John Barry's sultry saxophone score completes the intoxicating atmosphere. Though successful at the box office, it faded from cultural memory beneath flashier thrillers. But its erotic tension, sultry cinematography, and powerhouse performances make it a must-watch for fans of psychological drama. Body Heat represents a perfect bridge between classic film noir and the modern erotic thriller, influencing countless films that followed. Blood Simple, 1984. The Coen brothers' debut is a lesson in minimalism, tension, and style, announcing the arrival of two of American cinema's most distinctive voices. In Blood Simple, jealousy, greed, and paranoia explode when bar owner Julian Marty hires sleazy private detective Lauren Visser to kill his unfaithful wife Abby and her lover Ray, one of Marty's bartenders. But nothing, absolutely nothing goes according to plan. Shot on a shoestring budget of $1.5 million, the film's murky shadows, haunting score, and perfectly timed twists built the Coens' reputation overnight. Frances McDormand, in her film debut, commands the screen with an intelligence and resilience that would characterize many of her later roles. The film's title comes from Dashiell Hammett's novel Red Harvest, referring to the mental state of people who have committed murder. This psychological disintegration plays out as the characters make increasingly desperate choices based on mistaken assumptions. The Coen script is a masterclass in dramatic irony. The audience knows things the characters don't, creating excruciating tension. Cinematographer Barry Sonnenfeld creates a visual language of dread using low lighting, unexpected angles, and slow, deliberate camera movements. One iconic tracking shot along a bar counter, passing over a drunk patron to reveal a crucial detail, demonstrated the Coens' visual ingenuity, even on a limited budget. Though not a massive hit on release, it was championed by critics and slowly earned a cult following. Roger Ebert recognized its brilliance immediately, writing that it showed intelligence and craftsmanship that would be praised in a film by a veteran director. Today it stands as a blueprint for low-budget suspense and a masterclass in building dread from silence. The film established many hallmarks of the Coen style: dark humor, sudden violence, and characters undone by their own worst impulses. To Live and Die in L.A., 1985. If Miami Vice had teeth, it would look like this. William Friedkin's To Live and Die in L.A. is a sun-scorched, neon-lit chase through the seedy underbelly of counterfeit crime in mid-'80s Los Angeles. William Peterson is Richard Chance, the rogue Secret Service agent on a revenge mission after his partner is killed. And Willem Dafoe oozes menace as Rick Masters, the counterfeiter and artist he's after. Friedkin, who had revolutionized the crime thriller with The French Connection, returns to the genre with renewed vigor. The film's centerpiece, a wrong-way car chase through the LA River Basin, rivals his earlier film's famous pursuit, creating heart-stopping tension as Peterson and his partner flee armed thugs by driving against freeway traffic. Friedkin shot this sequence without proper permits, creating genuine danger that translates to the screen. With a pulsating Wang Chung soundtrack and vibrant cinematography that captures both LA's glamour and grit, the movie screams style. But it's not just flash, it's nihilistic, morally complex, and emotionally sharp. The film's shocking third-act twist upends audience expectations about protagonist immunity, something rarely seen in American cinema of this period. The film delves into the mechanics of counterfeiting with documentary-like precision, showing Masters' artistic process in creating fake bills. Friedkin insisted on technical accuracy, consulting with actual counterfeiters and requiring the prop department to create convincing fake bills. Despite its brilliance, the film struggled against more conventional thrillers and studio concerns about its moral ambiguity. United Artists reportedly wanted a more upbeat ending, but Friedkin refused to compromise. Now, it's revered as a defining work of 80s crime cinema, and a masterstroke from Friedkin's second act that perfectly captures the decade's excess, corruption, and style. The Hitcher, 1986. A young man picks up a hitchhiker on a lonely stretch of highway and unlocks a nightmare that defies explanation or escape. The Hitcher is part road movie, part existential horror, with Rutger Hauer delivering one of the most chilling performances of the decade as John Ryder, a serial killer who seems less human than a force of nature. The premise is deceptively simple. Jim Halsey is driving a car across the Southwest when he picks up hitchhiker Ryder during a rainstorm against his better judgment. When Ryder reveals his homicidal intentions, Jim manages to throw him out of the car. But that's just the beginning of a cat-and-mouse game across the desert, as Ryder frames Jim for his own murders and systematically destroys everything in his path. What sets The Hitcher apart isn't gore, though the film has moments of shocking violence, including the infamous truck pull scene that still makes viewers gasp. It's the psychological terror, the sense of fate stalking the protagonist with no escape. Hauer's villain is both Angel of Death and Cryptic Avenger, less a man than an idea. "Do you know what I did to the last person who called me a liar?" he asks at one point, with a smile that suggests both charm and bottomless malice. Director Robert Harmon and cinematographer John Seale create a landscape of dread from the American Southwest, turning open spaces into zones of vulnerability. The film builds a mythology around Ryder without explaining him. He seems to appear and disappear at will, surviving incidents that should be fatal, always one step ahead. Released to poor box office and mixed reviews, it's now seen as a subversive masterpiece that deconstructs slasher tropes. Rather than the typical final girl scenario, The Hitcher presents an innocent young man struggling to maintain his humanity when faced with seemingly motiveless evil, a slow-burn descent into madness and fear. It raises questions about identity and duality that linger long after the credits roll. Mona Lisa, 1986. Bob Hoskins never hit harder than he did in Mona Lisa. He plays George, a recently released convict, who takes a job as a driver for a high-end call girl named Simone. As their working relationship deepens into an unlikely friendship, so does the emotional complexity and the danger. George's growing obsession with rescuing Simone leads him into London's criminal underworld, where his romantic delusions collide with brutal reality. Directed by Neil Jordan, the film explores class, power, and broken masculinity with nuance and grit. Hoskins brings vulnerability and wounded pride to George, a man whose conception of chivalry is outdated and dangerous in the modern world. Tyson is equally compelling as the sophisticated escort whose carefully constructed facade hides deeper traumas. Michael Caine adds an extra layer of menace as Denny, the manipulative pimp and crime boss lurking in the background. The film takes its name from the enigmatic Leonardo da Vinci painting, suggesting Simone's similar inscrutability to George, who projects his own ideals onto her rather than seeing her as she truly is. This theme of misperception and fantasy drives the narrative toward its inevitable confrontation with truth. Jordan films London with an eye for both squalor and beauty, contrasting the glittering West End with the seedy underbelly of King's Cross. The soundtrack features Nat King Cole's version of Mona Lisa to ironic effect, highlighting the gap between romantic ideals and harsh reality. Hoskins' performance won Best Actor at Cannes and an Oscar nomination, but Mona Lisa still flew under many viewers' radars in a decade dominated by bigger, louder films. Gritty and heartbreaking, it's a noir of the soul that examines how easily we deceive ourselves when seduced by impossible dreams. Runaway Train, 1985. Two escaped convicts hop aboard a train, only to discover it's unmanned and barreling toward disaster with no way to stop it. Runaway Train is pure adrenaline, elevated by philosophy and raw emotion. Jon Voight and Eric Roberts deliver career-best performances as the convicts, both earning Oscar nominations for their roles. Voight plays Manny, a legendary prison rebel whom the warden has kept in solitary confinement for 3 years. Roberts is Buck, a young, brash prisoner who joins Manny's escape through the brutal Alaskan wilderness. After boarding what they think is their ticket to freedom, they discover they're trapped on a speeding train with no engineer, joined by a railroad worker who becomes their reluctant ally. Based on a script by Akira Kurosawa, this survival thriller is less about the train and more about what freedom, control, and purpose mean to two broken men. Director Andrei Konchalovsky, a Soviet filmmaker working in Hollywood, brings an outsider's perspective to this distinctly American story, focusing on existential themes rather than simple action beats. The film's Alaskan setting provides stunning backdrops and genuine danger. Much of it was shot on actual moving trains in treacherous conditions. The sound design creates a character from the train itself, with its relentless rhythm becoming a heartbeat for the story. The final images, particularly Manny's last moments, achieve a kind of transcendent visual poetry rarely seen in action films. Critically acclaimed but commercially lukewarm, it's now considered a hidden gem of the action genre. Voight's performance alone is worth the ride. He transforms completely into Manny, a man who has been caged so long that freedom itself becomes a kind of trap. The film asks profound questions about destiny and choice while delivering edge-of-your-seat thrills, a rare combination in any era. Birdie, 1984. Two friends, one war, one man retreating into fantasy. Birdie, directed by Alan Parker, explores trauma and recovery through dreamlike visuals and emotional authenticity. Based on William Wharton's novel, it tells the story of two friends from Philadelphia whose lives are shattered by their experiences in Vietnam. Nicolas Cage plays Al, who returns physically scarred but mentally intact. Matthew Modine is Birdie, who retreats completely into an obsession with birds and flight, refusing to speak or acknowledge human reality. The film moves between their adolescence, where Birdie's fascination with birds and flying already marks him as different, and the present, where Al attempts to reach his traumatized friend in a military psychiatric hospital. Both actors give deeply vulnerable performances, with Cage showing surprising tenderness years before he became known for his more excessive acting choices. Modine captures both the wonder of Birdie's bird obsession and the profound disconnection of his post-war state. Their friendship forms the emotional core of the film, a bond strong enough to potentially save Birdie from his retreat from humanity. Parker directs with visual flair, using floating camera movements and dream sequences to put us inside Birdie's mind. These fantasy sequences, where Birdie imagines himself soaring over the landscape, create a poetic counterpoint to the harsh realities of working-class Philadelphia and the horrors of Vietnam. Peter Gabriel's innovative score enhances these sequences with otherworldly soundscapes. Despite winning the Grand Prix at Cannes, it never took off in the US, perhaps because its unflinching look at war trauma was too uncomfortable for mainstream audiences still processing Vietnam. But time has only deepened its emotional resonance, a must-watch for those who crave sincerity and are willing to follow a film into difficult emotional territory. After Hours, 1985. What happens when one average guy takes a wrong turn into the surreal nightlife of Manhattan? Martin Scorsese's After Hours is a black comedy fever dream, equal parts hilarious and horrifying, chronicling one man's Odyssean journey through the labyrinth of New York's Soho district after dark. Griffin Dunne plays Paul Hackett, a buttoned-up word processor whose late-night date with a mysterious woman turns into a domino effect of weird encounters from punk artists to dangerous lunatics, to an angry mob that mistakes him for a burglar. It's Kafka by way of screwball comedy, with Scorsese's signature camera wizardry, giving even the simplest scenes a sense of kinetic dread. Made between The King of Comedy and The Color of Money, After Hours represents Scorsese working on a smaller scale, but with undiminished creativity. The film began as a low-budget project when financing fell through for The Last Temptation of Christ, giving Scorsese freedom to experiment. The entire movie takes place over one increasingly chaotic night, maintaining a real-time feeling that heightens the tension. The supporting cast is extraordinary. Terry Garr, Catherine O'Hara, John Hurd, and Linda Fiorentino create memorable characters who each contribute to Paul's mounting paranoia. The film captures a specific moment in New York history when Soho was transforming from an industrial area to an artistic enclave, creating a borderland where anything seems possible. Cinematographer Michael Ballhaus helps create the film's dreamlike quality, using unusual angles and tracking shots that disorient the viewer just as Paul becomes increasingly lost. Howard Shore's score incorporates classical themes that suggest both comedy and impending doom. Despite being one of Scorsese's tightest and most original works, it's often left out of his highlight reel in favor of his gangster films and period pieces. But for fans of dark comedy and urban absurdity, After Hours is pure gold, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying adventures happen on ordinary weeknights. The Dresser, 1983. Set backstage at a provincial English theater during World War II, The Dresser is a poignant two-hander about a fading Shakespearean actor referred to only as Sir and his fiercely devoted assistant Norman. As air raid sirens wail outside, Norman struggles to prepare the increasingly senile Sir for his 227th performance as King Lear. The tension between artistic legacy and human fragility forms the film's emotional core. Directed by Peter Yates and adapted from Ronald Harwood's play, it's a masterclass in performance and pacing. Both Finney and Courtney earned Oscar nominations for their roles, creating a complex relationship that spans devotion, resentment, manipulation, and genuine love. The film explores the sacrifice required by art, both from the artist and those in their orbit. Sir is tyrannical, childish, and occasionally brilliant. Norman is enabling, bitter, and ultimately faithful to the point of self-destruction. Their codependent relationship becomes a lens through which to view larger questions about the purpose of art during wartime, the price of greatness, and the invisible labor that supports genius. Yates captures the world of wartime theater with documentary precision: the shabby dressing rooms, the threadbare costumes, the small company of actors performing Shakespeare while bombs fall. The film's structure builds toward Sir's performance as Lear, creating parallels between the aging king and the declining actor. It's a quiet theatrical film that didn't make much noise in the pop-driven 80s, despite its critical acclaim. But for lovers of character-driven drama and theater, The Dresser is a heartbreaking triumph that celebrates the ephemeral magic of performance while acknowledging its cost. The Hidden, 1987. A fast-paced genre mashup that blends sci-fi, horror, and buddy cop thrills. The Hidden is one of the most inventive B-movies of the decade and a perfect example of how genre films could transcend their limitations in the hands of clever filmmakers. An alien parasite hops from body to body, leaving destruction in its wake while seeking increasingly intense sensory experiences, stealing cars, blasting music, committing armed robberies, and murdering innocent bystanders. FBI agent Lloyd Gallagher teams up with skeptical LAPD detective Thomas Beck to stop it, but Gallagher harbors a secret about his own identity that will change everything. Director Jack Shoulder keeps the action moving at a breakneck pace while still developing the central relationship between the mismatched partners. The film features spectacular car chases, shootouts, and body horror alongside genuine character development. McLachlan, fresh from Blue Velvet, brings his unique otherworldly quality to the role of the mysterious FBI agent, while Nuri grounds the film as the straightforward cop whose worldview is about to be shattered. The screenplay cleverly explores themes of identity and humanity. What makes us who we are when our physical bodies become vessels for something else? The parasite's progression from hedonism to political power creates a subtle commentary on 1980s excess and ambition. Special effects by Kevin Yeager create memorable transformations as the parasite moves from host to host. The film also features early appearances by Claudia Christian, Babylon 5, and Danny Trejo in small roles, adding to its cult appeal. It was a modest hit upon release, but its cult status exploded over time, particularly after McLachlan found fame in Twin Peaks. If you want something wild, weird, and way ahead of its time, this is the hidden gem for you. A film that influenced everything from The X-Files to Men in Black while maintaining its unique identity. Barfly, 1987. Based on the writings of poet Charles Bukowski, Barfly is a raw, poetic portrait of artistic self-destruction in the dive bars of Los Angeles. Mickey Rourke plays Henry Chinaski, Bukowski's alter ego, a down-and-out alcoholic whose brilliant writing is buried beneath a haze of bar fights and self-loathing. Faye Dunaway co-stars as Wanda, a fellow alcoholic who begins a tumultuous relationship with Henry, recognizing something special in him, despite his deliberate embrace of society's lowest rungs. Their romance is volatile, tender, and ultimately doomed by their mutual addiction, yet contains moments of unexpected beauty and truth. Directed by Barbet Schroeder, the film doesn't glorify addiction, but instead captures its tragic rhythm with honesty and dark humor. Schroeder fought hard to get the film made, working directly with Bukowski to develop the screenplay and even threatening to cut off his own finger when a studio threatened to pull funding. A story Bukowski immortalized in his novel Hollywood. Rourke's performance is transformative. He altered his appearance and studied Bukowski extensively to capture the writer's hunched posture, slurred speech, and surprising dignity. Dunaway matches him scene for scene, bringing vulnerability and intelligence to a character who could have been a stereotype in lesser hands. The film's authenticity extends to its locations, shot in actual Los Angeles dive bars with their regular patrons sometimes appearing as extras. The Golden Horn Bar becomes a character itself, a dingy sanctuary where the outcasts and forgotten find community among the stained countertops and cheap drinks. Critics were split. Some called it indulgent, others called it a masterpiece. Over time, Barfly has earned the latter title, particularly for those drawn to unvarnished truth on screen. It stands as a vital counterpoint to the decade's glossier visions of success, reminding viewers that poetry can be found in the most unlikely places, and that choosing to live outside society's expectations, even destructively, can be its own form of freedom. Babette's Feast, 1987. From Denmark comes one of the most spiritual and sensory cinematic experiences ever made, a film about art, sacrifice, and the transcendent power of a perfect meal. Babette's Feast tells the story of Babette Hersant, a French refugee who arrives at a tiny, austere religious community on the desolate coast of Jutland in the 19th century. After serving as cook and housekeeper to two elderly sisters for 14 years, she wins the French lottery and decides to spend her entire fortune preparing a single, luxurious French dinner for the ascetic villagers. Directed by Gabriel Axel and based on a story by Isak Dinesen, the film is both simple and profound in its construction. The first two-thirds establish the sisters' community, founded by their father, a strict Protestant minister, and show through flashbacks how both women sacrificed love and artistic fulfillment for religious devotion. Babette arrives as a mysterious figure, fleeing political upheaval in Paris, her past only hinted at. The film's final third is dedicated to the preparation and consumption of Babette's feast, a sequence that has become one of cinema's most famous depictions of food, as she prepares authentic French delicacies like turtle soup, caviar, quail in puff pastry, and baba au rhum. The suspicious villagers vow not to enjoy the witch's Sabbath they expect. But as they eat and drink, the sumptuous meal breaks down decades of interpersonal tension, awakening sensual joy in people who have denied themselves pleasure for a lifetime. The film operates as both Christian parable and meditation on the role of the artist in society. Babette, revealed to have been a famous chef in Paris, creates an ephemeral masterpiece that her audience cannot fully comprehend, yet is transformed by nonetheless. Her sacrifice, spending everything she has on a single transcendent experience for others, mirrors Christ's sacrifice while also representing the purest artistic impulse. It won the Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film, but faded in the shadow of louder imports. Today it stands as a film that feeds the soul, quiet, generous, and unforgettable in its affirmation that earthly pleasure and spiritual grace need not be enemies. And there you have it, 15 forgotten classics from the 1980s that deserve a second, and maybe even a first, look. So, which one are you adding to your watch list first? Or did we miss a favorite that deserves a spotlight? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're hungry for more cinematic treasure, hit that like button, subscribe to Golden Age Classics, and ring the bell so you don't miss a single frame of hidden brilliance. Until next time, keep watching the gold between the reels.